Moving on to this week's market report, and planting continues to grab many of the headlines. Plus, corn and soybean futures are showing some interesting trends. And trade talks with China continue, but in the meantime, is South America looking to take our place in the export market? And finally, could African swine fever usher in more demand for beef? We'll look at it. Darin Newsom is our analyst this week. We sat down on Wednesday to get his take on futures, trade, and what's really gotten his attention this planting season.
You know, of course, the obvious answer is the weather. We continue to see some winter weather across upper plains, upper U.S. Midwest, out to the parts of western Nebraska and the Dakotas and so on. We're seeing flooding right now along the Mississippi River. Weather is the key issue. How soon will we get planted? Will we get planted? All of these things are up in the air at this point. And we really can't do anything in the grain markets, particularly in corn, soybeans, and even spring wheat, until we start to get a better feel for what the weather is going to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks down the road.
Looking at the monthly charts here, maybe the weekly charts, corn futures, what are you seeing here?
In the weekly charts, not seeing a lot. They're just going sideways, but the real interest, if I apply my Goldilocks principle, which is daily charts are too short, monthly charts are too long, but weekly charts are just right. I'm going to break that rule. I'm going to look at the daily chart here today, and what we see is short-term uptrends in both old crop July corn and new crop December. These started late last week. So what it does, it gives us an opportunity. It gives us some hope, and I know that's a 4-letter word, but it's something that we haven't seen in quite some time, to where we can build a little bit of buying interest in here. Now, do I think we're going to see funds erase this huge position that they've got, this huge net short position? Absolutely not. They're very comfortable with it. They know the fundamentals just as well as we do. They know that at some point all of this grain on storage that was reported in the March quarterly stocks report is going to move to town. But for now, that grain's being held pretty tight. It's giving a reason to buy the market in here. Again, short-term uptrend.
And what are we looking at with soybeans?
Soybeans, just an ugly, ugly situation right now. We've been moving to new lows. It continues to chew to new lows all the time. We aren't getting any fresh, bullish news out of the trade talks that are going on this week, unless something happens, but we haven't seen anything other than the fact the president keeps threatening to walk away from the table. Now, whether or not this is just gamesmanship, and it very well could be, but that's really the only news that we've seen this week, and it's not really bringing a lot of buyers back to the market.
Do you think there's a growing concern that the U.S. may lose their market share, especially soybeans, to South America?
Yes. And this isn't just this marketing year. I think this is a long-term deal. We could have a trade deal, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going back to square one and we're going to be 50% of the equation of feeding soybeans into China. I just don't see that happening right away. So yeah, I think it's a problem. I think it's a changed landscape that we're going to have to deal with. We talked about, for the last 10, 15 years about this demand market that gave us new price objectives in corn. I think we're looking at the flip side of that coin, a new demand market, or the lack of demand market, that's going to change our price objectives long term in soybeans as well.
Okay, and want to spend a couple minutes talking about African swine fever. That's something that we've been following for months now on our show, and it looks to me like the U.S. is kind of starting to take more of a proactive role in keeping this disease as far away as possible. So first off, kind of give us an update, if you could, on where we stand with African swine fever in China and the pork market as a whole.
Well, number one, we don't know exactly how bad the situation is in China. It seems to get worse with every report that we see. Now, as far as the pork situation as a whole, I know there are some alarmists out there that are saying this is going to change the landscape of the meat industry forever. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. We've seen a short supply spike in the pork in the lean hog market. It jumped up and now it's come back down. We could see a demand market. May not. But I do think it's something that is going to continue to provide support to the overall pork industry here in the United States. Whether or not it changes everything as dramatically long term is yet to be seen.
Any advice for pork producers here?
If they didn't get that top in the June contract here from a couple weeks ago, I think they're going to have another opportunity. This thing's not over yet. We're going to continue to get stories, but remember, we can rebuild hog herds, at least here domestically, very quickly, so we can ramp up our supplies. Again, it'll take a few months, but we can do it. We can and ramp up our supplies. Then it comes down to, are we going to be able to ship them? Is the trade problems going to make it so we have trouble shipping these oversupplies that we could produce? I think these are all this is all things that we're going to have to watch going forward.
Do you think over time this will make beef even more in demand? Maybe somebody's thinking, oh, well, I can't get pork, I'll just eat more beef.
Possibly here domestically. You know, if we're shipping more of our pork overseas, that could very well increase our demand for beef. Do I think it's going to increase shipments of beef to, say, China and so on? I don't think so. They're pretty pork and poultry centered. Now, it could certainly help their poultry industry. Then, of course, we always have the poultry diseases that go through as well. So I think it is changing. I think it could change some of the demand situations that we see in the meat industry as a whole. Do I think it's going to be this earth-shattering, as some are calling it, game-changing event? No, not at this time. I want to see how quickly we react in increasing our hog supplies before we can say, you know, this thing's going to be lasting decades.
And Darin, before we let you go, any marketing or risk management advice that you want to leave us with today?
Soybeans are very difficult right now. I mean, you really can't jump out and do anything at this point. You have to hope that we get, again, there's that four-letter word, but you have to hope for something to happen, something to give the market a reason to rally. In corn, if we don't have anything done, I think we're going to have an opportunity here in the coming days and weeks, again, due to that short-term rally, to get some new crop on. It's all going to be weather-dependent. Wheat, the best that we can hope for at this point is to see some sort of post-harvest, because we're just getting ready to move into harvest, get into some sort of post-harvest rally. Other than that, you know, I'm hearing a lot of talk about just selling across the scales. That's usually not my favorite thing to do, but in wheat, you might not have any choice.